I want to switch gears a little bit, moving from Sierra Leone to the US, because the US health system has its own challenges. And we were told last summer by CDC that we should expect to see an imported case of Ebola, right? The epidemic had been going on for so long in West Africa. But we were reassured that we wouldn't see sustained transmission in the same way that we were seeing in West Africa. And then, of course, I moved to Dallas, and a few weeks later, the first ever patient to be diagnosed with Ebola in the US was diagnosed in Dallas. And 2 nurses who cared for him became Ebola patients themselves. That shouldn't have happened in an American hospital, though, should it?
Now it should not happen. And building on some of the themes that have been expressed, we started behind the 8 ball a little bit in terms of the rapidity of the disease. We didn't really truly understand the transmission. So in medical school, when I learned about Ebola, and you hear about diarrhea, and you hear about some of the vomiting, no one really was prepared for the volume in terms of body fluids and fluid replacement. That's number one. Number two, just to build on some of the things you spoke about for staffing. When you look in some of the hospitals, you may have 1 nurse for 1 patient. And you look in our critical care units, it may be 2 nurses for our sickest patients. For an Ebola patient, what we've learned is that you need really 4 nurses to 6 nurses to take care of a patient. And part of that is to deliver the care. Part of that is working in the PPE and making sure that the PPE is worn correctly. And we actually ended up adopting almost like the airline co-pilot checklist in terms of what should the PPE be? How do you put it on? How do you take it off so that you don't contaminate yourself or the environment? And then with the rapidity of information that was flowing, how do you make sure that healthcare workers feel comfortable taking care of someone like this? And this was not a criticism, this is just a fact. We had differences in opinion from the World Health Organization, the CDC. For us, it was our state Department of Health and our city Department of Health, where not everyone was aligned. And what we ended up doing, we sort of picked what we thought were the best practices until there really was harmonization and alignment. And doing that in a very rapid manner. So it's not just about protocols and PPE. The next part of this is training people and removing them from the normal day jobs that they were doing in terms of caring for patients. So it's how do we then fill in the gaps as we're taking nurses from our critical care units to get ready and be prepared for somebody with Ebola. And then to me, what was amazing, not just in terms of what happened in Texas in the hospital, but then look at the apartment where the patient came from. And to me, what was amazing is no one in that apartment got sick. And so that tells you that we may not truly understand how this disease is transmitted, that in the hospital we had 2 nurses versus you had family members who really cared for this guy before he came back to the hospital, and none of them got sick.